You might be familiar with the accident that happened in Washington, D.C., next to the airport.
Video from earlier today showing crews pulling out the remains of the jet. Crews were able to remove the first of two engines.
On the 29th of January, Flight 5342 lifted off from Wichita, Kansas to go to Washington, D.C., capital of the U.S. The airplane was a Bombardier CRJ-700, a fairly small airplane. It picked up 60 passengers to head out. Just like we said, this airplane is fairly small. It could only fit 70 people. But this time it only had 60 passengers and 4 crew members, so 64 overall. At 5:18, this airplane lifts off from the Wichita airport. After about 2.5 hours, this CRJ-700 is getting fairly close to the Washington, D.C. airport, and it asked Ronald Reagan Washington Airport for clearance to land. The control tower immediately answers and says runway 33 is ready for landing. To land on runway 33, the airplane has to come over the Potomac River so it can properly land on this runway. But on the other side, there's a Black Hawk helicopter with 3 soldiers inside it that are flying in Washington, D.C. And it is good to know it's flying on the same river this plane is supposed to pass. And if you look from afar, it seems like these two things are about to hit each other. When the airplane is about only 700 meters from the runway, the Black Hawk runs into it. And this causes a fireball to happen where both airplane and helicopter explode and fall into the river. The interesting part is that this airport is located somewhere very sensitive in the country. It's right next to the Pentagon. The United States Capitol or the Congress is right there, and the White House is right there as well. Which is why when this accident happened, a lot of people thought it was a sort of attack because it was so close to government buildings. But they quickly realized that it was actually the fault of the Black Hawk pilot. Let's get to know the Ronald Reagan Washington Airport a little bit better. It has been decades that pilots that fly in and out of here have said that this is probably the most unstable airport they have ever landed on because it is kind of a brain fart to go through all this traffic. It is designed in a way where it can't fly in and out smoothly. And a lot of people had said an accident is bound to happen, and it finally did. It is also interesting that the employees on the control tower also have said this, that it is kind of complicated to control all these airplanes going in and out, but they do their very best job to make sure it happens safely. When Flight 5342 was getting close to the landing strip, it had clearance to go through and it didn't have to check in with anybody. But on the other side, the Black Hawk does not have clearance like that. Since it is a military helicopter, it could use visual flight rule. That means you don't have to rely on the control tower or radars on what is on the way. You're scanning the entire sky with your eyes. That's why the Black Hawk was flying in a zigzag pattern so it could make sure it sees everything before it moves forward. Of course, not every airplane or aircraft could use visual flight rule. They have to have clearance. But since it was a military helicopter, it had it. Even then, when the control tower realized that the Black Hawk is getting close to the airport, it called in and asked them, "Are you seeing Flight 5342 in your path?" And Pat 25, which is the code name for the Black Hawk, replies that yes, I see them. But Pat 25 was completely mistaken because it is seeing the airplane that's taking off, not the one that's landing. It is 9 p.m. at night. It is completely dark. And the Black Hawk isn't properly seeing the airplane lights in the sky because it has a huge city under him with all the lights on, so it is kind of weird to determine what is an airplane at that point. And that's why he didn't see the airplane and runs right into it. Just like we said, after the crash happens, all the pieces that has been destroyed from the airplane and the helicopter fall into the frozen river underneath. Even though this part of the river is only 2.5 meters deep, but it is extremely cold. Even then, the rescue team immediately got there to maybe, just maybe, save the most amount of people. But unfortunately, the more they looked, the less people they found because they realized that after this accident, pretty much everybody has died. What made this rescue mission even more difficult was that the wind came through, which made this extremely cold water even colder. As you can see in the video, there is even ice floating around in the river. So the rescue team had to be careful not to get hypothermia. Close by in Washington, D.C., the Kennedy Center is located, where it had some security cameras. And the videos you're seeing is taken from the Kennedy Center far away. And you could say this is pretty much the only footage they got from the accident, because no one was literally out there recording it. In this video, you can also see the airplane that's taking off that made the Black Hawk pilot mistake it for Flight 5342. And that airplane leaves, but these two hit each other, and they all died. Because of this accident, you could say Washington, D.C.'s airport is going to completely change the rules on how taking off and landing happens. Because this is an extremely serious situation. It had been years since pilots have spoken about how unsafe this airport is, but finally, now they're taking some action. The saddest part about this is that Flight 5342 was only 700 meters from landing. And you could say all those people expected to land and be on ground in a few minutes, and probably had families waiting for them. But unfortunately, they never came.